You ever wonder when a buyer says we're happy with our solution, is that true? Now, the reason this is an important question is if a buyer says this, that can be a hard stop, right? So if you are trying to replace an existing solution and they say, yeah, we're good, then is that game over? Like, what are you doing? And so the ability to be able to say, is this a honest statement? Not to say the buyers are straight up lying to you, but they might just not have the full picture. And so there's a couple ways to be able to, in a polite way, explore this question to see, is it truly that we're good and you should take a hike, or that there's an actual sales opportunity there? Now, there's four areas where you can potentially find where maybe they're not as good as they think they are. Maybe they're not as happy as they think they are. And so if we think about the four areas, the first one is pain. And so from a pain perspective, what you want to think about is no solution is perfect. I don't care what solution it is, it's not perfect. And so inevitably there's going to be pain somewhere, right? And the idea would be, are they experiencing pain in the organization? If so, that starts to chip away at that happy story. The second thing is cost. And when you think about a solution in place, now cost can be sometimes a challenge because they already have sunk cost, right? They paid for the solution that's in place. And so they might think that, hey, there's not cost because we've already paid for this. But the reality is that there's always ongoing costs, there's operational costs, there's hidden costs, et cetera. So there's always costs baked in beyond just the initial price that you paid. And so if you can tap into some of those hidden costs, that can start to diminish the happiness. The third thing is uncertainty. So depending on what the type of solution is, maybe it's not giving them the full picture. Maybe it's pockets of information. Maybe it's just a partial image of what's going on, whatever it is. But sometimes based on the design of the solution, based on the information being fed into it, et cetera, it can create uncertainty for an organization, which is problematic when you're trying to make the strategic decisions. So uncertainty can lower happiness. And then the last thing is risk. And risk can take different forms, whether it's current and present risk, whether it's kind of risk around the corner, future risk, et cetera. There's a lot of different types of risk. And if there's enough risk, that can diminish happiness. Now, these are the four things, and those might seem basic, but there's another level to this. And this is important depending on the person you're talking to. And so when you think about these four things, what you have to think about is there's two different stages that you can be in, or two different states that you can be in. And so you have direct and indirect. And so let's look at the difference. When you are talking to that person, when I say direct, what that means is these things apply directly to them, okay? So you're talking to the person, and when you talk pain, boom, like they feel it. They feel it every single day. That's a direct pain, and that's awesome, right? But maybe the pain is not direct, it's indirect. So I'm an executive, and it's really, one of my frontline managers that experienced the pain. So it's not something that I personally am experiencing, but it is happening in the organization. And so the ability to be able to say and to think about, okay, this person seems happy, they don't see the pain, but what they're only looking at is, are they directly in kind of the pain radius, if you will? And if they're not, they feel like it doesn't exist. But the fact is, it absolutely could exist for someone else in their organization. Same thing with cost. Are they personally experiencing the cost? If so, great. If not, where might that cost be hidden, and who might be aware of that cost? And so that's the indirect part. Same with uncertainty. So for an executive, maybe this is something that they directly feel that says, hey, half the time I get information or reports from my team in this solution, I have no idea what's what, and I end up trusting my gut. So maybe they do feel it. or maybe they just have more questions than answers, and the people that actually feel it are over here. And then the last thing is the risk. So again, it might not be a risk to this person directly, but somewhere in the organization, there may be risk. And so the reason that I share this is it's an advanced kind of sales methodology to be able to look to say, hey, in an ideal world, I can find direct pain for the person I'm talking to, because if we think about motivation, direct pain is much more motivating. But if I can't find this, at the very least, I want to be able to look over here and say, can I find some of these? Because if I can, then at least I can start to argue that says, are you really that happy? Because think about these factors for both you and your team. At some point, would you be open to a new solution? Okay. So I just wanted to share this because this is something people struggle with. And that can be a question or a statement that can really slam the door on the opportunity. But the reality is there's plenty of cards left to play. There's plenty of ways to potentially chip away at that story and find an opportunity. You just got to be smart about your questions and where you're looking.